Welcome back to another in our series of the great chapters in the Bible. Our chapter today comes from the Old Testament book of Esther. Esther, chapter 3, Haman's plot against the Jews. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, and advanced him, and set his throne above all the officials who were with him. And all the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage. Then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you transgress the king's command?" And when they spoke to him day after day, and he would not listen to them, they told Haman, in order to see whether Mordecai's words would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage to him, Haman was filled with fury. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone. So, as they had made known to him the people of Mordecai, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus. In the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pur, that is, they cast lots before Haman day after day, and they cast it month after month, till the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, "There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of every other people, and they do not keep the king's laws, so that it is not to the king's profit to tolerate them. If it please the king, let it be decreed that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who have charge of the king's business, that they may put it into the king's treasuries." So the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, "The money is given to you, the people also, to do with them as it seems good to you." Then the king's scribes were summoned in the 13th day of the first month, and an edict according to all that Haman commanded was written to the king's satraps, and to the governors over all the provinces, and to the officials of all the peoples, to every province in its own script, and every people in its own language. It was written in the name of the king Ahasuerus, and sealed with the king's signet ring. Letters were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with instruction to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all Jews, young and old, women and children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. A copy of the document was to be issued as a decree in every province, by proclamation to all the peoples, to be ready for that day. The couriers went out hurriedly, by order of the king, and the decree was issued in Susa, the citadel. And the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. Winston Churchill is quoted to have said, "You have enemies? Good. That means you stood up for something sometime in your life." In our world today, the pendulum has swung against the bully. People around the world have declared that once and for all, we shall no longer let the underprivileged, the weak, the vulnerable be harmed or humiliated. I like the sentiment, and I don't disagree with the motives. However, this is a lesson every generation has learned and relearned and will continue to learn. If you don't believe me, write it on a piece of paper, put it in a sealed envelope, and mark it "Open in the year 2050. And see if in that year the world is still fighting bullies. Now, I don't mean to diminish the efforts or say that it is futile, but it is an ongoing battle. Consider the civil rights movement of the 1960s, or go back to World War II and the fight against the Axis powers, or read Cervantes' Don Quixote de la Mancha, about a man tilting at windmills, and on we could go. But today we go back to the book of Esther and a man named Mordecai who stood his ground. Mordecai stood for his faith that told him he could not bow down to any but the God of heaven. Now consider the respect and admiration Mordecai got for his stance. Oh, wait, they didn't admire him. For we read in verses 3 through 4, Then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, Why do you transgress the king's command? And when they spoke to him day after day, and he would not listen to them, they told Haman, in order to see whether Mordecai's words would stand, for he had told him that he was a Jew. For a moment, consider that as a course of the easiest route to getting along in compromise, Mordecai most likely could have chosen to simply let it go and bow down to Haman and move on with his life. Why put a target on your back? Why put up with the hassle day after day? Just bow down, for crying out loud. No, Mordecai would not bow down or pay homage to Haman or any other man. Warning, history lesson dead ahead. Lest we think this is an unprecedented event in history, there is an event not unlike this that occurred in the Persian Empire less than a century before, called the slaughter of the Magi. The Magi were a group of immigrants living in Persia with a set of beliefs based on the Zoroastrian religion. On one occasion, during a political upheaval, the blame was laid on the Magi, and a decree went out to kill any and all in the streets. Nightfall saved the ultimate slaughter. But in subsequent years, they celebrated the slaughter of the Magi on one day in the year. If any Magi was found outside their home, they were killed. So we see that the empire, that the Haman was within the tradition of the Persian Empire to request such a genocide, for they had already committed genocide to the Magi. Mordecai knew the Persians meant business when he heard the decree to have the Jews killed. That's a pretty high cost for standing up for your religious principles, don't you think? In reality, that's the cost for standing up to bullies. You will most likely take a beating for it. Now, here's the twist in this amazing book. The name of God is not mentioned even once. We don't read of the God of Mordecai or the God of the Jews rescued them, or Haman sought to slaughter the people of God. There's also another word that is not mentioned in Esther: providence. That which God interjects that his will might be accomplished. We may call upon Joseph from the book of Genesis to better help us understand the concept. In chapter 50 of that book, in verse 20, Joseph said, "As for you, you meant it evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring about that many people should be kept alive as they are today." The very idea Mordecai implies to Esther when he says in chapter 4 and verse 14, "For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise from the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Oh yes, it is easier to capitulate, to yield to the seemingly overwhelming power of the bullies. It's easier to keep your mouth shut and your eyes forward and let things be. However, when it comes to our faith, the price might be higher than we imagine if we should keep silent. For Jesus tells us in Mark chapter 8 and verse 38, "For whoever is ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him will the Son of Man also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels." I wonder if we have really comprehended all that Mordecai said when he proclaimed, "And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" And I wonder if when this life of mine has passed, if it can be said that I stood for something, if I stood for anything. And Lord willing, let's meet here again tomorrow and take another look at a great chapter in the Bible.